the Director of Operations with the DYC, and Ria will give a quick introduction to our organization, then we can get started with the event.
Of course. I'm Ria. I am our Executive Director for the DYC. And just for a quick introduction into who we are as an organization, the Democratic Youth Coalition represents an inclusive national grassroots movement of young activists participating in civic engagement programs that support progressive and democratic campaigns and caucuses. Programs include youth-led town halls, outreach and issue-based campaigns, and coalition-building partnerships that empower youth to get involved in democracy. I will now pass it to Ashi to introduce our panelists and more about this event.
Yeah, sure. I'm actually going to go ahead and turn it back over to James. You're on mute, James.
Yeah. Sure. So we have a couple very exciting speakers here with us today, representing the organizations Fair Vote Virginia and Rank the Vote. Additionally, from the office of Representative Jamie Raskin, we have a senior counsel, Devin Ombres, who will be here providing us some insight on voting legislation. So please take a moment to introduce yourselves. Let's start with Devin.
Good evening. Thanks for having me, everybody. My name is Devin Ombres. I serve as senior counsel to Congressman Jamie Raskin. That said, I am appearing in my personal capacity and do not speak for the congressman. But I'm very glad to be here and share with you everything that I can.
Thank you. And next to Monica Burke from Rank the Vote.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Monica Burke, and I'm a national organizer with Rank the Vote. We are a national nonprofit, nonpartisan, and we are brand new. We've only been around for about 14 months. In this work, we are advocating for ranked choice voting by working hand in hand with about 40 different states and counting across the country, with the local grassroots activists in those states, including a surprisingly large number who are in college and high school. So I am very excited to talk to you all, and I hope that you will jump on board and think about joining your local state and advocating for ranked choice voting. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, Elizabeth from Fair Vote Virginia.
Hi, yeah, I'm the president and a founding member of Fair Vote Virginia, and we advocate for ranked choice voting. And we go to the General Assembly, we mobilize our grassroots, and we work with other organizations with similar ideas. And we get a lot of work done by coalition building. So thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So thank you to all the panelists who are here. And I would also like to thank our fellows from Turnout Nation. They're a nonpartisan organization encouraging more people to vote. Just wanted to thank them for graciously agreeing to co-host and moderate today's event. So I'll turn it over to all of you to introduce yourselves.
Great. Well, I'm Tora Arsala. I'm a fellow based in Northern Virginia. Excited to be here, and I'll turn it over to my colleague Rashawn to introduce himself.
Hi everyone, my name is Rashawn. I'm a sophomore at Golden Vassar College, and I just want to say thank you all for taking your time to come talk to all of us. So thank you. I'll pass it to Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm the executive director at Turnout Nation, and we've also got my colleague Sienna here.
Hi everyone, I'm Sienna. I'm the volunteer coordinator for Turnout Nation. Thank you, Democratic Youth Coalition, for having us, and to the panelists for coming together today to talk about ranked choice voting. We'll just be asking the panel questions, and we'll try to keep them to about 2 minutes from each panelist and maybe about 8 minutes per question. And I'll just kind of gently remind everyone periodically, so we'll have some time at the end for audience Q&A. So with that, Rashawn, would you like to get us started with the first couple questions?
Yeah, of course. So my first question is, What are some of the positive changes we are likely to see if ranked choice voting increases in prevalence in American elections? Devin, can you start for all of us?
Happy to. I think that some of the good things that we will see if ranked choice is instituted is really just an increase in diversity of viewpoints in the political system, because it will allow smaller and third party and independent parties to actually gain traction with the electorate. It will require people to coalition build, which I think everybody here is all very much for, because you can't alienate anybody, and it's really going to bring, I hope, some civility back into the political system rather than the winner take all that we have right now. And the other thing I think is that we can also look forward to it maybe getting rid of, if we were to institute it on the national level, especially for presidentials, we could get rid of spoilers potentially as well. And certainly, I think if we look back 20 years, Al Gore would have been the president rather than George W. Bush, and I think the world would be a very much different place at the moment.
Got it. Thank you. Monica, what do you think?
Yeah, hi, thank you. I love what Devin said about the general election. I think also in terms of the primary election results, it would be very powerful to have ranked choice voting in the primaries as well, so that the candidates emerging from the primaries can feel very confident that they represent the majority of voters coming out of that primary. Oftentimes, these primaries have very big fields. I know where I live, we had a congressional race with about 10 Democratic candidates, and the person who won with 22% of the vote. And she said it's very hard for her to govern because almost 80% of the people did not vote for her. So she calls herself the poster child for ranked choice voting. This is where I live in Massachusetts. So I love what Devin said about the general election, but similarly for the primary, I think it's incredibly important as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And Elizabeth, what do you think also?
I hope it would it would change the incentives and possibly the way that the candidates once elected would govern. So maybe they would be less afraid of getting primaried and more likely to actually look at the low-hanging fruit, see where solutions could be, even if it's bipartisan solutions, like where can we work together and actually get things done, especially when we're talking about Congress. But even at the state level, like our state legislators often are very divided, and the easy solutions are ignored because there's a lot of partisanship. And we found, I think the great example is in Maine, maybe it was Maine or Massachusetts, where it must have been Maine, the Senate candidates did a commercial together where they said, vote for me first and him second, or her first and me second, and one of us will win. And, we start working together, and instead of, so much of the negative attack campaigns, maybe we actually start getting some more work done.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer, Elizabeth. Thank you all for those great answers. Yeah. Does anyone else have any thoughts about this question? Okay, sounds good. So my next question would be what are some of the downsides or risks we have to be aware of with ranked choice voting? What do you think, Devin?
So I think one is ensuring that the education is there. And I hate to go back to 2000 again, but if people are unaware of how to properly fill in the ballots, I think there's a pretty easy way for ballots to be thrown out. And so the educational program in showing people how to do this properly is something that we cannot fail at implementing in the first go round. You know, especially with a lot of the laws, and I'm looking at it at the national and congressional standpoint. You know, I think for the vast majority of ranked choice is at the state and local level, with a lot of mayoral and city council. Very few are even statewide at this point. I think Maine, Alaska is moving to ranked choice for statewide and congressional. There's a couple of other states, I think, that do a couple of statewides, but making sure that everybody gets it right, and making sure that the education system is there, because there's one party, I'm not going to say who, but they're using every play in the book, and some that aren't even there, to try and undermine the legitimacy of elections. And if people are screwing up with their ballots, they can get tossed. And with some of the really draconian laws that are being passed in Texas, Georgia, Florida, that are giving election monitors essentially carte blanche to be invasive when people are asking for assistance for voting, and with felony penalties potentially applicable to people who are helping others vote, we got to get it right, because one party, not going to say who, is trying to completely undermine small d democracy in this country.
Yeah, thank you, Devin. Monica, what do you think?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, this is a really great question. So changing the way that we have voted for so many years in this country is a huge deal that we can't just take lightly. And so we're touching on something that's incredibly important. Most people have not heard of ranked choice voting, so I want to +1 what Devin said about the education. It's right there. So people can be scared, have anxiety, they can be nervous about using ranked choice voting. But luckily, the reality is that it is incredibly well tested. It has been in use in Australia and Ireland for over 100 years. Elizabeth will probably talk a little bit about Fair Vote and their incredible work. It is, they have this wonderful page that I think I go to almost every day. You know, where is RCV used? It's on the Fair Vote website. It's in, I don't know, I think it's 26 states. It's over half of the United States of America. But in terms of addressing this anxiety though, the states and the localities, the municipalities that have passed it, have really done a great job for the most part with voter education. And that is indicative of most recently in New York City, where they have ranked choice voting. Over 95% of people responded to an exit poll saying that it was either very simple to use or somewhat simple. So 95%, that's pretty good, right? And then a couple of years ago in 2018, in the mayoral race in Santa Fe, where they use ranked choice voting the first time, 88% ranked more than one choice and 61% ranked all of the 5 candidates. So these exit polls that are done when we first are using ranked choice voting in New York City, just in February, and then in Santa Fe in 2018, they really show that the first time that people are using them with very high marks, people do feel confident. So, so that's fantastic, but that is really incredibly critical, the voter education that Devin brought up. Thank you.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Like, thank you for mentioning like voter education. Like, that's definitely like something like really important. And yeah, and like Elizabeth, what do you think also? And like also like about your work with like Fair Vote as well.
So could you just repeat the question again? I had to step away because my dog was being really obnoxious.
Yeah, no worries. The question was, what are some risks or like downsides that we have to be aware of with RCV?
I'd say definitely misinformation. I think what happened in Florida, from what I can understand and what I heard from some other advocates on another meeting like this, was a well-known organization put out some information that said ranked choice voting disables low information voters and people of color. And Represent Women has put out some information that counters that, really great information that says in town, city council and mayoral elections where ranked choice voting has been implemented, it actually gets results that are more reflective of their communities and gets closer to gender parity. So when I was on this meeting with these folks from Florida, they said, man, we really wish we had those studies to counter the arguments of the people putting out this misinformation in the Florida campaign, because they missed their mark by just not very much. Florida, or whatever city in Florida that was trying to implement, I think it was a ballot initiative, just barely missed it. So I think misinformation and Fair Vote National has put together a lot of counterpoints to that. There's a website called rcvfacts.com that counters a lot of the arguments that are coming out that may not be based in facts. So definitely being prepared for counter arguments and misinformation.
Got it. Thank you, Elizabeth.
If I can piggyback on that, just because Florida is, I feel like the bane of America's existence, and I say that as a proud third-generation Floridian. You know, if ranked choice voting had been in play this last year, if you all were following, there were 3 ghost congressional candidates who came in as independents, who took incredibly liberal positions, attacked liberals and Democrats, and basically undermined the election in what should have been 3 Democratic Senate districts, which really swung the power of the Republicans in the Florida Senate. And I think that I truly hope that there are some criminal investigations going on as to that. I know the New York Times is digging into it. But if ranked choice voting had been around, it would have alleviated that issue. And well, we still have the 2-party system, and we're not going to get away from that until we get into multi-member districts, and we can probably talk about that later. You know, it's still gonna, it alleviates a lot of some of the dirty tricks in playbook that we're seeing be brought out for the first time.
Yeah. Thank you, Devin. So does anyone else have any other questions before I pass it on to Jen?
Thanks, Rashawn. So I would like to ask the panel if we could actually go into a little more detail, maybe for some who aren't quite as familiar with it, but about how ranked choice voting works and in which ways it's similar to the elections that we have now, or you just kind of vote for one candidate, and in which ways it's different. And I realize that's sort of a big question, and we have a time constraint. So if you want to distill it to 1 or 2 things that are your favorite points, and maybe I'll switch the order up a little bit and see if Elizabeth, if you want to jump in and comment first.
Sure, if I can unmute, there we go. So the way it's similar is it's 1 ballot, 1 election. And what's different is you get to rank your candidates in order of preference. Many times, depending on how the legislation is written, you can vote for as many or as few as you want. I think we've already talked about eliminating the spoiler effect. So me as an independent, I sometimes vote Republican, sometimes Democrat, sometimes Green, sometimes Libertarian, independent. So what led me to be interested in ranked choice voting was that I was really sick and tired of people telling me that I was wasting my vote by voting for that minor party candidate or that independent. So when I learned about, hey, I could actually vote for the person I want and have a backup choice and maybe even another backup choice, that was really appealing. I think it's also really great because we're getting to majority support and we're getting away from a plurality result. And, you know, that can result in an extreme candidate with only getting 20% of the vote. But it's even better than something like a runoff, because in runoffs, you have more than one election, like in Georgia. And while it's supposed to get to a majority result, it's often skewed because not as many people show up for that second election. So you can get a really kind of quirky result with good intention. So you get better results in one election on one ballot.
Thanks for that. And Monica, what are your thoughts? And let me know if you want me to repeat the question.
I think I got the question. It was, how does it work? And then how is it different than how we currently vote, and how is it the same? Was that it?
Yeah, and if you're welcome to pick like one or two of the, you know what I mean? One thing you like that you find is a little bit similar, one thing that you like about it that's different, or that you don't like, maybe, if that's the case.
Yeah. So with ranked choice voting, it's a simple upgrade, a very simple upgrade to the way that we currently vote. Instead of picking one candidate, you just rank the candidates in the order that you prefer them. So first choice, second choice, third choice, and so on. And your first choice is your favorite candidate, and your second choice is your next most liked candidate, and so on. And you can rank as many or as few as you like. So that race that I mentioned to you before, where there were 10 candidates running for Congress where I live. And, you know, every time I went into a debate or a candidate forum, I was secretly ranking them in my head, right? But there was one candidate that I really didn't like out of the 10. And if I didn't want to vote for that one in my imaginary ranked choice voting that I, you know, wished I had, right? You wouldn't have had to have voted for that one. Or if you really just wanted one person, you could just still just vote for that one person. So in terms of how it's the same and how it's different, the ballot design will look different, and how it is counted will be different. You still have primaries and general elections, unless, like Elizabeth said, you know, they could minimize the number of candidates that make it to the general. It could be like a top 4, top 5 situation. Or maybe you just have ranked choice voting in the primary, or maybe you just have ranked choice voting in the final, depending on how the legislation has been passed where you live, where this, in this jurisdiction that uses ranked choice voting. But theoretically, you could still have primaries and generals, or you could save money and just have the general. You could have parties listed. You could not have parties listed. You could vote for one candidate. You could rank your candidates. You could rank however many you want. You still use, you can still use secure paper ballots. And a lot of the voting machines already have the software for ranked choice voting. So in terms of how it's different, it gives you a stronger voice, because instead of being a political strategist now and trying to decide, oh, I really like this candidate, but they really don't have a shot of winning, so now I have to vote for this candidate. You don't have to do any of that. It makes it simple. You just go in and vote the way that you truly and honestly believe. This is my first choice, second choice, third choice. So you can truly express your preferences for all of the candidates that are running that you want to express an opinion about. You may only want to express an opinion about one or two, and that's fine too. The way that we vote now, our voices are limited to strictly picking one. And I will end there because I've been talking for a while, and I will pass it to Devin.
That's a great answer, though. Thank you.
No, I think you both really hit the nail on the head. I'm just a simple ledge staffer. I'm not in the weeds on this stuff quite as much as you are, but from my perspective, I think that not having runoffs is an awesome thing for the reasons that you stated, Elizabeth. We don't have to worry about spending millions more dollars in both the cost of running an election and campaigning. It'll be over. It'll be over immediately. And we all wouldn't have been sweating Georgia for a month and a half, or for 2 months after November 2nd. The other thing that I really think is crucial, and it's one of the first things that I said, is that it gives voice to more people. It allows more ideas to enter the marketplace, and allow people to really get a broad spectrum of what is important. And it's not just winner take all. You have to pick the Democrat, you have to pick the Republican, because it doesn't matter. It's one or the other. It's not zero sum. I think for some time, were this to be implemented on a nationwide basis, it would be zero sum. But I do ultimately think that you would see, if not a European parliamentary style divergence in parties, you would at least see probably one or two additional parties start taking seats in state and national legislatures. And they would caucus with whomever they're going to caucus with, but it really, I think, adds a diversity of thought, and will also, to a degree, get rid of some, I think, internecine fighting within the parties themselves. So I think it would be, good, and I ultimately think that there might be some type of center left, center right party that emerges as the predominant party, with other folks on either side of it. But at the end of the day, it's more of a central country being driven by centered ideas. I think right now the Democrats are very much a center left party with an emerging left wing, and the Republicans are a hard right party with a lot of their would be traditionally deemed Republicans as wandering in the wilderness at the moment. And I don't know that they have a home, but there is a solid 30% of this country that is pretty hard right, and that actually makes up, I think, a dominant portion of the Republican Party. So this would really, I think, help marginalize some of the most eccentric ideas that are in the marketplace, and bring some civility and sanity back into politics.
And so for the next question, Elizabeth, you, I think, hinted at this sentiment maybe a little bit in your answer to the previous question, but is ranked choice voting susceptible at all to this idea of strategic voting? Or when we think about third-party candidates, people, maybe people on the left in 2016 saying if you vote for Jill Stein, or in, when was it, 2000, a vote for Nader is a vote for Bush, or this idea, I'm going to show my age here, when Ross Perot ran in the early 90s. And, it was thought that, like, if you vote for him, you're kind of like giving away your vote because a third party candidate's never going to win. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, do you think ranked choice voting is susceptible to these same, unfortunate sentiments about voting for non-mainstream candidates? Or if not, why is it better?
I think it's definitely a counter argument or counterpoint to anybody that wants to say you're wasting your vote, because now you can say, no, I'm not, because I'm also going to vote for the person you want to vote for. I'm just not going to rank them as my first choice. I don't know how quickly, if implemented at the state level everywhere, like we would start bringing more libertarians or greens or other parties up. I don't know how fast that would happen. It might start happening at the local level and then trickling up. And, I hope so. That would be great. It would be great to have more voices and more choices and more unique solutions. Or independence, just independence. They could really swing the pendulum on some issues that are just gridlocked. If we had a handful of independents, true independents in Congress, like, things could start moving a little bit more. And so I'd really love to see that happen. And I would love to be able to vote my true preferences and not think so strategically. Me personally, I vote the way I want to vote. And, I know that it probably is a wasted vote, but hopefully not forever.
Yeah. And Monica, how about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I love this question because I alluded to it when I was talking about those 10 candidates running in my congressional district. Literally, I love ranked choice voting because every time I go to vote, I get annoyed, whether I'm voting for school committee or board of selectmen, or, whenever there's more than 2 people, right? It's really annoying because I can't rank them. So in terms of the strategic voting, it's the ranked choice voting is the most immune to strategic voting, to that pressure of trying to figure out which candidate's going to win, who is everyone else going to vote for, and therefore, how does that impact how I'm going to vote? I shouldn't have to worry about how everyone else is voting. I should just research my candidates, go in, and then vote for people truly and authentically how I want to. So basically, every vote has the same weight in the runoff rounds. So if my candidate wins in this round or that one, it's still going to be 1 vote that I have. You really can't. It's nearly impossible for a voter to manipulate the outcomes and do this strategy and with ranking their ballot with ranked choice voting. So the incentive and the empowerment is really to vote honestly and authentically with your gut, with what you actually want. If you like this sort of fringy candidate or whatever, that's fine. Vote for them first, and then if your second choice, you can vote second. Maybe that's a more popular candidate. That's fine. But at least you tried. At least you got, you didn't have to hold your nose, and so you at least got to go in there and do that. Yeah, so it takes care of the vote splitting and the spoiling, and so we don't have to worry about candidates also themselves. So we've talked a lot about the voters, but what about the candidates, right? Like, you don't want to run. If I'm a candidate, I don't want to run if I think I'm going to be the vote splitter now, right? Like that Perot and Nader thing that you were talking about before, you've been Nadered or whatever, right? So you don't have to worry about that now. Like up in Maine when Jared Golden ran, and there was 2 independents that also ran. And when I was watching those debates, and Bruce Poliquin was the Republican, and there were the 2 independents, I was watching those debates, and I was like, wow, the 2 independents seemed a lot to me like Democrats when I was listening to those debates. And a lot of people that I knew liked the one independent there, Tiffany Bond. And the Democrat voters that I was talking to were relieved because they didn't really like Jared Golden nearly as much as they liked Tiffany Bond. Well, Tiffany got, I can't remember, maybe 5% of the vote. But they still could go in and vote for Tiffany and not worry about it. They could go in, vote for Tiffany. Okay, they put down Jared or the other candidate. I think his name was William as their second and third choice. That's fine. But you can just vote authentically and truly for who you want to. Thank you.
Yeah, I like how you said too, you can vote how you want and don't have to be so stressed about how other people might vote. You're not overthinking that. And we hear sometimes from people who are a bit apathetic about voting or just not regular voters when there's 2 kind of mainstream main party candidates that they say, well, I'm not really excited about either candidate. So yeah. Devin, I know we're kind of getting to the end of the 8 minutes here, but if you have anything else to add.
That's okay. I think that Monica and Elizabeth are right. I take a slightly more cynical view, but again, I'm looking at it. I have a tendency to look at it from a national, presidential, senatorial standpoint, just because that's the sandbox that I play in. And I think it's still possible for people to come and be spoilers. But I think it would require a great deal of strategy and, basically a national plan to do it. Some of the, never Trumpers could have voted for a third party candidate who's not Trump and not a Republican or a conservative candidate, and not put a secondary choice, which would have cost Biden some people. Some of the Bernie or Busters could have done the same thing, which would have cost Biden some people or Hillary some people. So it would take a lot of strategizing to do. I don't think that it is impossible were it to occur at the national level, but at the local level and at the state, and I think even at the congressional or senatorial level, it's not going to happen at a presidential level. Certainly it could. but it would take a lot of national strategy and a big push. And I say this as a guy who works for somebody who came up with the Nader Trader idea way back in 2000. So, and I'm happy to talk about that offline if anybody wants to, but you can go back, and I think he wrote an article in Slate or The Atlantic about Nader voters trading to Gore voters across state lines to make sure that there was no spoiler. So it's possible. I just think it would take a lot of effort to actually do it.
Thanks for that. And I think Sienna is going to take it away for the next question.
Sure. So one question we had was, how will the data from ranked choice voting affect the media surrounding certain races? Will the exact rankings be publicized? And if a candidate, say, didn't get most of the majority of the first rankings, but the race was so split that they were elected. So if it's clear that they weren't, popular, but they got a lot of second, choice rankings, how would that affect the media surrounding them and their public strategy? And we can maybe keep this one shorter because we're running low on time. Monica, if you wanted to start out with that.
So just to summarize the question, if a candidate does not win in the first round, but they end up winning the election, how does that change how they govern?
Yes, so if, because now they can say, I got this many votes, but since there's more data around how the rankings were actually, how people voted for each ranking, it's not that simple.
Yeah, so if a candidate doesn't win in the first round, that's like the Jared Golden example, right? He didn't win. Bruce Poliquin won. But the reason why Jared ended up winning that election is because his viewpoints were more in line with the two independents that were running. And so Tiffany Bond and William, the majority of voters wanted that type of a candidate versus the Bruce Poliquin type of a candidate, the more conservative type of a candidate. And so Jared has, governed according to that. And in fact, as a testament to ranked choice voting in Maine, specifically in that district, they had ranked choice voting the second time that Jared ran and wasn't even used. So outright won the majority of the votes without ranked choice voting. I don't believe any, unless I'm mistaken, I don't believe any of the races in Maine actually used ranked choice voting because all of the candidates, including Susan Collins, actually got the majority. So it's almost a testament to the strength of ranked choice voting that up in Maine. So I don't know if that entirely answers your question. And also there seemed like there was a part about your question about the data being available.
Yeah, like the exact rankings of the candidates.
I believe that, and I think Elizabeth might be the expert on this, but I believe that is the data is definitely made available, the round by round. And if you guys all want to play with it, you can go on opavote.com and you can go on rankit.vote. Have you guys all been on there and actually done ranked choice voting elections, mock elections for like anything like ice cream or pizza or anything? Have you guys done that? I bet Elizabeth has a poll she could drop in the chat. But yeah, you can see the round by round data as it goes through it.
Great. And if anyone else has any thoughts on that, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I would just say that in Virginia, where we've done it in either within the party, so the Republicans used ranked choice voting at their convention last year in August to select their state chair. And they published on the Republican Party of Virginia all the rounds, they were very transparent about it. And Rich Anderson won with like 67% of the vote in the second round. Arlington Democrats, I believe, in one of their conventions, or several of their conventions have used it, and they've published all the data. what the media does with that data, they can twist it either way, but it's transparent, it's there, you can see it. I'm sure most states, it will be available, most localities, it'll be available. I think it's a good insurance to see how it goes through the process. Like Monica said, if you do a rank-it.vote or OPA.vote, you can see how it goes through the process. It requires a majority. So, sometimes the person with the most votes in the first round is not the majority choice. And you'll be able to see that in the numbers as the tabulation goes on. So I think it's a great thing. It's a great thing for analysts and people who like to look at the numbers, and even for parties looking at the data, because they can go, okay, well, this candidate was often the second choice for these group of voters. And, you can really just break it down even more than you can with plurality elections, because you can see the voters. So it's good for those strategists that love to dig into the data. It's also, just like any other vote, you'll be able to see, where the votes came from.
And I think I just heard Nate Silver's head exploding. He's so excited about this feasibility. So I just look at it from, I can't tack on to that, but just from a governing standpoint, I think it goes to what I've been saying all night, and it will lead to moderation and coalition building. And I think that is a very good thing.
Great, thank you. So we'll just move on quickly to the next question. Tora, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, so the next question we have is there any evidence that
Oh, it's a
voter
little-
turnout?
Yeah, nobody can hear you.
Tora, it was a little muffled.
So the question was,
Speak into the mic, into the
is
mic.
is there any evidence that support ranked choice voting? I'll start off with Elizabeth to answer that question.
I think
Okay,
it-
when you move away,
Can it help increase turnout? Is there any evidence showing that it might increase voter turnout?
yes, I don't have those studies right in front of me. Fair Vote Virginia or Fair Vote National, I believe, has lists of that on their website. But studies have shown that it does increase turnout. I think Monica earlier was talking about the exit polling and the approval, and just as they list those studies, they also list some studies that show that it does increase voter turnout.
Right, and Monica?
Yes, so there is evidence that it increases voter turnout, and I looked up the Fair Vote website while Elizabeth was saying that. So if you guys feel like clicking on that link, you certainly can. Basically, a couple of different studies have shown that it increases turnout by about 10%, which is, I think, really exciting. I would love it to be more than 10%, but I'll take it. If it's going to be 10%, I'll take it. Yeah, so that definitely is something that ranked choice voting has been shown to, in a number of municipalities, improve.
Right, and Devin?
Y'all are way outside my wheelhouse on this, so I'll defer to Elizabeth and Monica.
Right, so the next question is specifically for Mr. Ombre. Can you give us more details about the Ranked Choice Voting Act and other key legislation related to ranked choice voting?
Sure. So HR 1, the For the People Act, which you guys probably all know at this point, has a couple of provisions in it. One requiring a GAO study to look into RCV and its feasibility at the national level. And I think it'll address a lot of the things that have already been studied by Fair Vote, and take a deep dive into it, which will help build momentum for getting ranked choice out there and educating people and so on. The other thing it does is requires that all federal dollars spent on voting equipment be compatible with ranked choice voting. So I think it is really forward looking and kind of laying the groundwork to actually try and implement ranked choice voting at the federal level, which I think is very exciting. The Ranked Choice Voting Act, which my boss introduced last year, really creates, it highlights everything that we've been talking about tonight. It creates mandatory ranked choice voting for congressional and senatorial elections. It does not, I don't believe it does so for presidential, but it may. I have to go back and look. But it prohibits primary and general election runoffs, which I think is good. Again, it's a huge money saver. It requires that if states hold nonpartisan blanket elections, they must provide for 3 candidates to advance to the general election, or at least 2 if they have write-ins. You know, and then it goes through what we've been saying, whereas if nobody's wins the first round, somebody's eliminated, and the second, and then the winner's declared once they receive a majority of the votes. And it also provides a great deal of funding for states to implement ranked choice voting, because for both equipment, but also predominantly for education, something to the tune of $250,000 per congressional district in the state, or $1 million if there's, you know, only one or two. So I think it's really good, and it really lays the groundwork. I know we worked closely with FairVote in developing the legislation, since they're very much the leaders in this arena. And it just creates, you know, the system that we're seeing kind of gaining traction in a lot of localities, and starting to get some in some of the more unique states. I won't say progressive, I'll say unique, because I think Alaska and Maine are 2 really unique places, and they have some really interesting ideas in the realm of politics. So I think it's good. I think it's exciting, and you know, I hope it's certainly not something that's going to happen immediately, but I think that people are starting to get excited about it.
Right, and the final part of the question, I'll pass it over to Elizabeth. What can folks do to advocate for ranked choice voting in their states?
So in anybody's state, you can probably go to Rank the Vote or Fair Vote Virginia's website and see if you have, you know, a chapter doing this advocacy work in your state. Get in touch with them, say you're interested, you want to help. Money's great, volunteer's great. So donate or volunteer. Some simple acts you can do is, you know, host an event, or go to your social media and do a rankit.vote poll on any topic, just to get people thinking about it and understanding it. Letters to the editor, to traditional media. For us specifically, right now we are working on our local bill implementation. So we have our local efforts tab on our website, which is fairvotevirginia.org. You can go see and email your regional coordinator, or email you know, us directly if there's not a local effort in your area, and get one started. You can go to our website to the events tab and RSVP for our Sunday volunteer calls at 5 p.m. And that's where we, you know, share our updates. What have we done in our region? Any kind of training materials we have, and then we give you access to our volunteer resources drive, so you can dig in there and get to whatever information you need, talking points, strategy documents for local implementation, and more. So just donate or volunteer and talk about it.
And lastly, Monica, same question.
Yeah, so I just put in the chat, Elizabeth had referenced Rank the Vote. So I just put in the chat a link to that. So to get active and not just talk about this, but actually take action and be part of the movements like the one that Elizabeth is working on in Virginia. You can join grassroots movements in almost every state. You can volunteer, you can donate if you don't have time to volunteer, and even just signing up to get on their supporter list, even if you don't have time to volunteer and you don't have money to donate, just getting your name, your email on their list so that they can show their legislators and donors and such, look, we have this big list of people that support ranked choice voting in our state. But I actually, am I allowed to throw a question back to Elizabeth? Because I feel like she's in a very, very special state with Sally Hudson. And I feel like it would be really exciting for everyone to see a little bit of the story about how Sally Hudson, I believe she came in as a freshman, right? And just passed ranked choice voting, local municipality level. And right now we have 29 states that have pro ranked choice voting bills in state legislators. Devin's been talking a lot about the federal level, but at the state level, we have 29 states that have bills in the legislature. But Elizabeth is in a state that is a wonderful, wonderful success story. And I don't know if you would be okay talking about that a little bit. That would be really exciting, Elizabeth, I think, for people to hear.
Absolutely. So Delegate Hudson was a founder of Fair Vote Virginia as well. It was her, myself, Rich Gaffin, Bo Brown of the Libertarian Party. And we got together after, our individual interests aligned. Fair Vote National put us in contact, and that's how we started our chapter. So she got a lot of experience going through the couple years of lobbying our as citizen advocates, trying to get our bills passed. And finally, I think she was like, best way to do this is to jump in, inside strategy. Let's get this done. She ran for office. Once she won her primary, she said, I got to step back from this organization so I can concentrate on, being a legislator, because she pretty much knew in her district she would be elected if she won her primary. So, from the experience of going through and looking at the fiscal impacts of previous year's bills, she was able to craft her bill in a way that was most palatable to our General Assembly and get that local option passed. And, we were, organize our grassroots behind it. We testified, we mobilized everybody and coordinated with other groups like Unite Virginia and Represent Us, hosted events around the bill. And that's how that happened. And she did. She was very articulate and well-versed in what ranked choice voting was. She had the experience of going before the legislators the previous years, so she knew what it takes. She watched it happen, and then she became one and did it. And now she has started her organization, Ranked Choice Virginia. So I said it before, I'll say it again, the more the merrier, the more collaborators and coalition building we can do to get this passed further and implemented in Virginia, the better.
Great. Well, I'll turn it back over to James to close us out.
Yep, sure. So we have time for one audience question, pretty much. Try to keep the answers pretty brief, but I'm going to be combining a couple of the questions we got. We got a few in the chat. So it's pretty much recently they've been hearing about other methods of voting like score then automatic runoff, or Schultz. And we were just wondering, could you explain how that's different from ranked choice, if one is better than the other? I'll pass it to Monica first.
Sure. So I use the chat a lot when I'm on Zooms. So I'm going to throw another link in the chat, and surprise, shocker, it's another Fair Vote link. So this is a link to, I've been seeing the chat as well. It's hard to ignore it. The first link is, where is ranked choice voting used? So we alluded to this earlier, just in the United States. It's used outside the United States as well for 100 years, but ranked choice voting is used in over half of the country. Someone in the chat had asked about a different alternate type of voting, and I'm going to actually mention where this other type of voting is used. So approval voting is used in 2 places very recently. So St. Louis, Missouri uses approval voting, and Fargo as of 2020, and Fargo, North Dakota as of 2018. And I understand that some people are more interested in the approval voting than the ranked choice voting, but ranked choice voting definitely has a much stronger history, 100 years of being, we're already talking about the way people vote. But ranked choice voting is sort of much more accepted for over 100 years. So I think keeping things simple, nobody has mentioned proportional representation either. So we could talk about that for another hour. So in terms of making the system better, right? We have the plurality voting right now, first past the post, otherwise known as worst past the post in certain elections, right? You get the worst candidate that wins the plurality of the vote, right? So there's a lot of problems with our plurality system. Ranked choice voting is the system that has been around for 100 years. It is in over half the country. We have national legislation at the federal level, in state legislatures and so forth, advocating for this. It's a step towards, an even better system like proportional representation, which I understand nobody has actually mentioned in the chat, but that's even more impressive. So I think taking that first step towards ranked choice voting, which is more accepted, would be fantastic. And, inching us towards proportional representation would be beautiful as well.
Thank you. And Devin?
Again, just kind of out of my wheelhouse on this one. So
Sure.
apologies.
All right. And Elizabeth, if you have anything to say on this topic.
I think Monica answered it quite well. And we do get this question. I was at a whole convention on ranked choice voting in 2017 in Philadelphia. And it was like the drug dealer, like coming up and like pulling me out of a session and be like, give me this flyer, like, hey, what about star voting? What about approval voting? And it, it was kind of comical, but I don't want to dismiss anybody's idea. And I don't want to be that person that says, oh, that's too complicated, because that's what we hear. And I'm like, no, people can understand any concept, right? But I think there may be a little bit more thinking involved in starring or rating each candidate, because ranking is 1, 2, 3, do it every day. But then you have to think on an even greater level about the candidate. Well, how much do I like them above this one? Is it 1 star more or 2 star more? So I have wanted to dig deeper into some of these other alternatives for my own understanding and to come across this, when we have this question. And there's information out there. I just haven't tasked myself with it recently to reread it and understand. So I think Monica probably gave the best answer.
So think about it this way. Think about the people on this call. Say we're all running for office. This looks almost like that congressional district that I was talking about earlier, where we had the 10 Democrats running. Say we're all running for office, right? And say, how many of us are on here? 18, is that? Okay. You could rank all of us. Maybe James is your favorite candidate, and Sienna is your second favorite candidate, and Rashawn is your third favorite candidate. And you know what? You don't like anybody else, and that's it, right? Or it could work like this. Instead of James is my first, and Sienna is my second, and Rashawn is my third, and I don't like anybody else, it's going to work this way. You're just going to do a check, just a check for James, Sienna, and Rashawn, not indicating in any way how much more strongly you really like James. And like, you're just like, oh, I like Sienna a lot too. And you're like, oh, Rashawn, sorry, Rashawn. You're like, oh, I don't know. I'm okay with Rashawn. But all right, just to check. It doesn't put the power behind that first choice, the strength behind how strongly you feel. Okay, Michelle is 1, James and Rashawn are both 2. But I really advocate for ranked choice voting because I really like being able to rank everybody. Just like when I go to an ice cream shop, I walk in and I want the coffee Oreo, right? If we don't have the coffee Oreo, then I have a second choice. It's like the mint Oreo, whatever, and so on and so forth. We rank in our everyday life in so many ways with outfits. I picked this sweater today, right? I could have picked another sweater. it's not just like, I like these two sweaters. I actually have preferences and I rank them first, second, and third and so forth. So that's kind of the difference between them.
All right, thank you. And we just passed the 9 o'clock time slot. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who attended, and thank you to all of the panelists for your thoughtful responses, and to Turnout Nation for such a wonderful event. We thoroughly enjoyed this discussion and hope it was educational for everybody. So thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.